So, and that brings me to the next slide. So how many of you are new to the group? Haven't been with us at all? Your first meeting ever with Atlanta BI group, Atlanta Power BI group. You got one here. All right. Any other newcomers? Got people still coming in. All right. Good to have it, Atlanta Power BI group. All right, very nice. So outside Atlanta, do we have anybody? I know Alex obviously is outside Atlanta, but anybody else who is not in Atlanta or Georgia? Oklahoma, Sydney. Okay, there we go. New Zealand. Wow, got people on the other side island. Great. Thank you guys for joining us. Hopefully it's worthwhile. So if you plan to keep on attending these meetings, our website is Fernando. Okay, is on the Meetup. This is our main website. We also maintain a site on the community.powerbi.com. Although for some reason I have trouble actually posting events lately there, so this event didn't make it. But our primary website, Meetup. So quick as a bunny. While on this subject, go and find Atlanta Power BI, Atlanta, what is it called? Don't know, Atlanta Microsoft Business Intelligence user. So 12 years ago, we didn't have Power BI, we have Microsoft BI. But if you search for Atlanta BI, Atlanta Microsoft Business Intelligence users on Meetup, you'll find it right there. We, since 12 years, and in fact, what I'm going to do to actually copy this URL because I'm sure they'll start asking at some point, where are the recordings? Where are the recordings? Right here is the URL. This is where you can go on YouTube and if you give me like an hour after this meeting, I will pause this recording as well. If you want to get involved a little bit more in this group, always looking for speakers. The speakers are the most difficult thing in running the group, finding good speakers, right? So we'd like to thank people like Alex, who actually take the time to do presentations. But if you know about someone who actually is a good speaker, want to talk about Microsoft BI, Power BI, just let me know. And the last thing on this slide I want to touch upon, typically I would like to give a chance for someone who has a job opening in the Microsoft BI or Power BI area. Is anyone looking for BI talent? You can unmute yourself, share the opportunity, or you can put it in the chat window where actually people can find it. Anyone? Guess not. All right, I'll keep on going. So the next thing I want to touch upon is some interesting things that came out around Microsoft Power BI. Since the last time we met, which was the beginning of June, we meet on once monthly, typically on the first Monday of the month, unless it falls on a holiday, like what happened this month. So we had to shift it to the second Monday. But a couple of things actually caught my attention since the last time. The first one is something called self-service data marts that are currently in preview, which kind of goes a little bit together with what we're going to talk about, in this session, the main presentation, which is Power BI. And I want to show you a little bit of that. We have this segment. I appreciate if you guys don't want to ask questions, kind of mute yourself. So I'm hearing some background noise. But we have a special segment called prototypes. Used to be called prototypes with pizza. Now we call it prototypes without pizza. But I'm going to show you a little bit about self-service data marts, about things that I like, maybe things that I don't like all that much. And the second thing that it's probably worthwhile mentioning in the Power BI area is something called data in space. So the whole idea here, and in fact, if you go to the announcement, probably that's you will get a very idea about what's happening, but that there is an enhancements in Power BI Mobile, which is the application that we use to install on our mobile devices to access Power BI reports. So now what this application allows us to do is to attach reports to something in space. So for example, I can walk around my office or around somewhere, and maybe I have a report suitable for this particular area, something that I want people to be able to quickly find. So what this feature allows us to do is to attach basically a report or reports to that space in time. And then when people actually use their phone and use Power BI Mobile, Power BI Mobile was enhanced to actually scan the wherever you're going, and if it finds any reports attached to that location, it basically tells you about these reports. So I think it's an interesting feature. It doesn't require HoloLens or something like that. It's Power BI Mobile enabled. There is some setup involved though. I mean, the admin has to go and do some magic to enable that. All of this is documented in this block. And just want to hold a second on the self-service data mart just to finish the other two slides. So in this meeting, we're going to be talking about query folding in Power BI. Alex Powers, who is a senior manager at the Power BI CAT team, actually came all the way from far away, San Luis, I think, to tell us about query folding. So this is going to be a very exciting presentation. And next meeting is on August 1st, where we're actually going to have two presentations from 3Cloud Solutions. First one is going to be Power BI Mid Programmability, where we're going to see how we can use some programming interfaces to do some automation. And then we're going to have another session for how to do advanced scripting with Tabular Editor, which I really like, as you probably know about this. Okay, so let me just show you a little bit of data marts. So what is a data mart and why do we need it? Well, as you know, probably your experience and my experience has been that the bigger the company, the more difficult it is to get something done, right? So, but yet, large organizations typically have needs to set up data marts, to import data from somewhere, to transform it into ideally star schema, dimensions, fact tables. Traditionally, for this to happen, though, IT has to be engaged. IT has to go and set up a database, has to go and potentially import the data. Previously, that would require professional skills. But now we have this feature in Power BI Premium and Power BI per user that potentially puts things in the business user hands. So here's my scenario. Theo is a business user. He works for some company, AdventureWorks, and Theo's department, let's say this is sales, wants to import some data into a SQL database, right? Set up a data mart. So what we can do now, we can actually go to a workspace that is set up for Power BI Premium or Premium per user, and then we can go ahead and expand that new menu, and then we have a data mart feature in here. So when we do this data mart, when I click it, the first time I do it, Microsoft is going to do something behind it to actually provision a SQL database. I'm going to talk a little bit about that in a moment. So it's going to set up a database for you, a database that Microsoft owns, and then it's going to allow you to, it's going to throw you into Power Query that you are familiar with. Power Query Online, though. So if you are familiar with data flows, you already know, or if you've done any, I guess, work in Power BI Desktop, you already familiar with the Power Query. You have the skills to extract data. I'm not sure why this is not loading. Let's go and do a mighty refresh in here. Okay, much better. So I have already used Power Query to import several entities. And again, typically if you import data from things like Dynamics or other data sources, the data is going to be normalized, but you can use Power Query to shape it basically and transform it. So I have these three entities in here that I've already imported from somewhere. And I quickly want to go, actually before that, before I go and tell you what happens behind the scenes and where the data goes, I want to also bring your attention to a few icons here that we have at the bottom. So for the first time, one of the things that I like is that for the first time, actually, this feature, Power BI Data Marts, allow us to do some modeling ad hoc. So the idea here is that you've got your data, you transform it, you lend the data into that SQL database. And now what we can do, we could actually do some modeling things like creating new measures or setting up security. And I'm sure more features will come out in future. But essentially, this is the first time where we see some of the modeling features. Previously, had to use Power BI Desktop to do the modeling. Now we have them online. So that's pretty cool. I like that. The features right now are limited. As I said, new measures, roles, and what else we've got here? Power Query, obviously, data you can preview and all that. So let's take a look at what happens. So basically, the idea here is to Power BI.com to become the one-stop destination for your creating and designing your Power BI data marts. So you do everything online. If you're a business user and not familiar with Power BI Desktop, maybe you don't have to even go there. But if we take a look at see what's happening behind the scenes, let's say, how did I get here? So let's go back to the workspace where I created my data mart. And I'm going to go here and I'm going to do settings. I'm going to go to the data mart settings. So obviously here you can schedule your Power Queries on a schedule basis. But if I go to server settings, I see something called connection string, right? And if I get this connection string, and if I go to SSMS, and if I connect to it, just like I'm connecting to Azure SQL Database, I will basically get access to that database. Now, a few caveats here is that this database right now is read-only for you. So for example, if I take a look at the tables, I won't even see the raw data, the tables where actually the data is saved. Security actually prevents me from doing this. To access this data that is in the data mart, Microsoft actually automatically created views in the model schema. So if I go and run that view, actually now I can see the data. But the fact that the database is read-only means that I really I cannot create my own objects in this database. So I'm a big proponent, for example, of doing things as upstream as possible. I like to have views. I like to have to use T-SQL to do things like additional columns, expression-based columns, and things like this. Right now, we cannot do that. So essentially, we have access to these views, and pretty much that's it. And from that point on, that model that we built in Power BI Online is based on these views that Microsoft has set up for us. So how useful is going to be this feature? I really don't know. It really depends, I guess, on the company. I think the bigger the company, the more useful this feature is going to be. I personally would have, I think that more useful enhancements would have been to extend Power Query with destinations so that I don't have to even go and set up a Power BI data mart. I could actually have a database that is provisioned for me. I can just go and use Power Query, and actually I can shape the data and I can say where that data is going to land, right, in which database. But we have it. I'm sure Alex will have some things to say about this feature as well. Looking forward to his feedback. But that's from me. Any questions about this feature or beyond? I really like RLS dial. Okay, so we have some things in here. Let's just go real quick. See what people are asking. The data mart certainly add a new dimension to projects. Can hardly wait until I have a good use. Okay, this is from Al. And the solution. Oh, next month looks like a really great deep dive with those topics. All right. So if I had a dime for the amount of times when I was a business analyst and needed a database, I was told no by the IT teams. All right, so there's a lot. This is actually a good comment, and a lot of things have been done for the past few years to help with this. Maybe you heard about something called Dataverse, used to be called CDS for analytics. That's one area where if you use like Power Apps, data flow, you can actually go to the admin center in need permissions. So admin Power Platform, I believe it was Power Platform. I just wanted to show you real quick. So the Power Platform is actually one stop for the administrator, for the Power BI administrator to do things around Power BI, like setting up gateways and stuff like that. But one thing in here is that there is an option to actually go ahead and set up a Dataverse. I believe it was this one. So that's another way to set up a Microsoft provisioned database for you. In fact, Dataverse is a little bit more advanced because it's not only a database, but also allows you to bring like a business logic on top of that, like rules and such. And then you can use Power BI to connect to it. There is a special connector for it. Obviously, we have data lake. So if you do data flows, this actually, you don't have to have a data mart. You can actually use data flows to land the data in the data lake. That's another option to get your data out. And now we have a third option, which is a Power BI data mart that actually lands the data in a SQL Server database with the caveat that it's a read-only database. But good feedback in here. I really like the RLS dialog window in Data Marts. That's really clean. Yeah, this is one of the features that we have now online. Question from Fernando. Is it true that Data Marts were created for people who don't have one DBA friend? And I think Alex replied with a PPU, it's a steal if you pay $9 for DevSQ. He pays $5 for DevSQ for Azure SQL Database. But with Data Marts landing, can hardly wait to see more features come so I can decommission my other database. Should we forget, is asking again Fernando about M and start learning SQL stuff. So my 2 cents in here is that that's actually a very good question, because things can be done in different places. As I mentioned, I personally prefer to do things as upstream as possible. Upstream meaning as close to the source as possible. So typically what happens in my projects, I land the data, I extract it from somewhere, let's say some ERP systems. I put it on Azure SQL Data Mart that I create. And then from there, I build SQL views. And in these views, I try to do as much things possible, because SQL has been around for many, many years, scalable, performant. And I personally don't use Power Query all that much at all. But it really depends on your skill set. So recently I had a client, they don't know about SQL. They don't have that extensively. There are some problems with Power Query. They also can run in problems in T-SQL. But some things can be done more. My preference would be to use T-SQL as much as possible and be more lightweight on Power Query. Just use it things that T-SQL doesn't have. My personal preference. Okay, robust Power Apps connect to SQL Database server. Therefore, the premium Power Apps license is just worth it. Okay, this is about licensing in here. It is a great question. Alex says, should always use the best tool for the job. Okay, so pretty much we're on the same page. The fact that we have multiple ways to collect data, SQL, Python, Power Query, it opens a door for many users, right? That goes back to what I said. If you know T-SQL, if you have permissions, sure, create views. That will I would recommend. If you don't, then you just don't have. Okay, looks like we have issues with the audio. I hope you guys can hear me. Don't know what's happening. All right, a bit intermittent on my side too, but it's clear now. Okay, I'm gonna check my connection in here. Any other questions? Anything before I transfer to Alex? Anything that, sorry if this was shared already, but how can we access the recording? Yeah, so right in the very beginning of the meeting, I know that this question will pop up sooner or later. So if you scroll all the way to the beginning, you will see a link that points to, it's right here, https bit.ly Atlanta BI Rex. If you click on that link, that's going to bring you to YouTube. This way we put all the links for public access, no permissions required. You know, you'll see all our meetings for our group in there. Okay. Sometimes if you just access the meeting, you cannot scroll up the chat. All right, so I'm gonna put it right here. I'm gonna copy it. If you cannot scroll, copy the link, post it one more time. Okay. Also on the Meetup page for our group, but here it is. Any other questions? Anything else for what we talked about? Data Marts? I guess not. And that's about time to invite Alex to join us. He's going to tell us all about Power Query. Looking forward to it. Alex, please feel free to jump in.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And then let me go ahead and also turn on my video. I know resources are limited here with Teams and data, so Thank you everyone for just waiting for me here to get this started, and I'll turn it off too when we get in kind of the demos. You don't need to see my face, but first and foremost, just thank you everyone for spending some time with me, especially here from the state side. It may be kind of the evening hours. Maybe you've got the slice of pizza or you've kind of ordered a sandwich and you're just enjoying the user group tonight. So thank you for allowing us that time. And then of course, just a immense shout out here to the Atlanta user group, just bringing people together, especially during the pandemic. It's just an awesome way for us all to kind of network, connect with different people. So especially after tonight's event, just find me on Twitter, find me on LinkedIn. Let's connect. Let's start talking Power BI, Power Query, and of course, just Power Query, everything for me, just an area that I'm always excited about. But with that, let me go and introduce myself. So my name is Alex Powers. I'm a program manager here at Microsoft, located in St. Louis, Missouri. So just right up kind of the river here, a little bit from the Atlanta folks. My background is purely within Excel. I'm an index match fan. I did start using XLOOKUP here recently. It's very cool. But within that, I found Power Query, I found Power Pivot. The next thing you know, they're talking about this Power BI designer application. So I'm checking that out. Oh my goodness, my skill set is transferable. Find Azure, move on to the next thing, the next thing, the next thing. But I absolutely love kind of the low to no code citizen developers. So that'd be Citizen Data Integrator, which we'll be talking about tonight, just within the scope of Power Query, or kind of the citizen report developer if you're doing kind of the modeling experience within Power BI and that analysis services. But just so you know that I'm not a complete robot, I do have interests outside of work. They are cats, professional wrestling, and data. I've had an absolute fun time here. Probably this past year, there's like a strange neighbor cat in a church behind us, and he always runs through our door or runs through our kind of gate in our backyard. So I was just outside spending time with him tonight before the user, so I'm just all hopped up on cats. A bit of a coleslaw connoisseur, so vinegar or mayo based. I'm 50-50. I can go either way, but whenever I see it on a menu, I always have to order it. It's just who I am. And then, of course, I sat in a dashboard today. That light bulb moment went off for me, and I was like, oh my goodness, the way that this technology could change the way that I've been doing things just opened up so many doors. Obviously allowing me, to step out in front of more people here with the user groups, and then of course kick that door down to just kind of get into Microsoft and share my passions with you as well. But for tonight, we're going to be focusing on our objective, which is pushing transformations to the data sources query language to retrieve and transform data. So this process is known as query folding. So with that, it is one of the most powerful capabilities of Power Query and the M language. So M is that mashup language. So this will take our transformations. It'll dynamically convert those. In our instance tonight, it'll be a Azure SQL Database. So that'll be the T-SQL language. If you're like me, I didn't have a SQL background. IT wasn't handing out databases to me, so I never really had a good opportunity to learn. But I started just figuring it out with Power Query. After a while, getting a demo kind of SQL Server stood up, putting the pieces together just over time, but all done through a graphical user interface of query folding. So with that, we have a database. Underneath this, we're using Power Query to connect to it. In this example, we have the user interface. There's some language behind the scenes. We don't have to worry about it. Power Query is just dynamically writing this for us. So all that we see is just this user interface. We see our data, we click our chevrons, we filter something, and then from there, it then translates that to the data sources query language. So in this simple example, I see a ribbon. I look for the gender equal F, so female in this instance, and then automatically Power Query writes this select statement for me. So select from database table where gender is equal to female. Folded back to the source. I move on to the next thing. I do the next transformation. I move on to the next thing. I'm leveraging that heavy lifting, the compute and scale of a database. And of course, in this example, using the cloud, just Azure SQL. How you can find if you're folding or not, and let me go and zoom in here on the right-hand side. So within the Power Query online experience, so this would be both in Power BI, Power Automate, Power Apps environment. If you're building data flows within Teams, yes, you can do Power Query within Microsoft Teams, or even use an Azure Data Factory, Customer Insights. all of these different versions, getting data, connecting to your information, transforming it. This Power Query interface now includes these step indicators. Absolutely love them. But if you right-click on any of your steps, you'll also see this option to view the data source query. So this will be a read-only view where we'll see that dynamic SQL that's been written for us. But with all of this, Power Query is not going to stop you in the event that you potentially break the fold, that you are no longer able to leverage the Azure SQL database. That information will be streamed into Power Query. So we're not going to stop you. We're not going to limit you from getting your work done. Just something to keep in mind, just as we start looking at these step indicators. This process, though, is known as partial folding. So the mashup engine will start to compensate. So when I talked about streaming that data into Power Query, that's what I'm talking about here now. So it's no longer that heavy scale and compute of the database. It's now going to be leveraging this mashup engine of Power Query. So all of that will be done locally. If you're finding you're in that position where like my refresh times are going up, I'm not really sure what's happened, more than likely you have broken the fold in one of those scenarios. How you can find out if you have broken that folding, once again, the right-hand side here, let me go and zoom in. There will now be a new step indicator, just a red icon here. And then also our view data source query will no longer be viewable just for any of those applied steps, or maybe that folding has been broken. So I'm a huge fan of query folding. I've had those scenarios where people have been in a data set refresh, especially within Pro, there's that 2-hour window. They were hitting that 2-hour window. They're like, what is going on? They found a step that was broken. We redesigned it. Data sets now refreshing within about a minute, 2 minutes. That used to take 2 hours. That's just how destructive some of these actions could potentially be if we break that folding. Once again, though, push as much back to the system, so as far upstream as possible, as far downstream as necessary here in these examples. So this one is not folding. Different icons here. So a lot of these, once again, are just available within Power Query Online. Hopefully we'll see some of this come to the local development experience. So that would be both Power BI Desktop and then hopefully Excel at some point as well. But there are folding, not folding, might fold, which you probably won't see a lot unless you're just connecting out to an ODBC or an OData connection, just where it's unable to determine yes or no. At that point, we'll trust our logs. I'll talk about that a lot tonight as well. Opaque, inconclusive, I can't figure out what's going on, but I'll just leave it as kind of a gray. And then unknown here at the very end, just absence of a query plan. So the query plan is dependent upon it being a table return. So if you're trying to return a record, list, or just kind of that scalar primitive value, more than likely you'll just see that unknown icon there at the very bottom. But all new things. So if you haven't seen these icons in the past before, just know that we're really looking for that green folding, that red not folding. And then from there, we always want to get back into that folding operation where we can. Cool. So heavy lifting of our database. We want it to do all the processing all the time, especially with all of our point and click transformations. In this example, I think I write beautiful SQL. I don't want any machine to tell me what to do. So I'm going to give it just this initial SQL statement to say, here's my database, here's the server, here's my SQL statement, just return this data for me. And I see this happen all the time. I return the information. I'm now within the Power Query data preview. And I kind of like this. Like, I wrote my big complex statement. I also like the UI, so I'm going to start pointing and clicking. I'm going to do some additional transformations. Well, at this stage, if you were to add additional transformations just within the Power Query editor, it will then be moved into the mashup engine. So all of that heavy lifting at the database, all of that data has to be downloaded and streamed into Power Query. At that point, it has these 256 megabyte containers. So I'm having to store all this data. At that point, I keep doing more transformations. I keep clicking more buttons. It's just going to keep doing this like endless cycle here until that data is done processing into that final state. So I grab some data, I apply some transformation logic, I return the table as it should be viewed kind of within that step transformation. If I don't have enough, I have to page that data to disk. I have to go grab some more data. transform, return, just never ending. So if you're in one of these scenarios where you're like, oh my goodness, I know what that feels like. I just stare at this spinning wheel of data loading. More than likely, especially if you're like leveraging a cloud source that has its own querying language, you have potentially broken the step folding at some point. So just kind of keep that in mind. We want to push as much back to the database where we can. And then this is my own recommended practices. I don't call them best because there's no good, better, best. This is just what I recommend. You can read the documentation as well, but I call this my upside down pyramid. You're filtering, and of course, if you have to do any joins, try and get those out of the way as soon as possible. Try and limit your data. If you're going after 100 million rows and you really only need about 10 million of them, I would hate for you to break your fold early on. So limit the data to absolutely what you need. After that, start looking into doing transformations on top of that data. So if you have to, extract out a kind of a year part from a date, maybe do some uppercase with some text, whatever it may be, apply those transformations whenever data is kind of in a smaller state. And then here at the very bottom, just that column selection. It's just a weird way with column selection, just how Power Query is being dynamically writing that SQL statement. You can move that up, but just be aware the SQL may be a little bit performant if you kind of move it towards the bottom. So as I talked about, if the first few steps, you just break it with an unsupported operation, you have to download all of that data locally. You have to go through that 256 megabyte container, the transformation logic, just that never ending cycle that takes hours, days in some points, whatever it may be. I really want you to avoid those unsupported operations just early on within those first few steps. It's fine though, if you do break the folding, that partial folding that we talked about. If that is a design decision that you have made, that there is no other way to accomplish this, maybe within another system, or even writing a SQL view, just be aware, that mashup engine, it's still fine. It's not going to prevent you from moving forward, but hopefully at that stage, you've limited your data to the absolute necessary slice here at the very bottom. At that point, you're aware, yes, I see the red icon. Yes, I've broken folding, but here are the reasons why I had to do so. Cool. So recommended practices, my upside down pyramid. Hopefully you can leverage this kind of as you move forward. But with that, let's go and jump into the demo. We are going to use an Azure SQL Database tonight, so just the T-SQL language. We kind of wrote out on the abstract tonight too. If you know select, maybe from or aware statement, you're more than fine for tonight's kind of presentation. If not, don't worry, like me, I'm still learning it too, so I'll kind of explain that as we go. Any scenarios that are kind of referenced here, they are completely fake. I hope though. So if you are tonight kind of laughing, you're like, oh my goodness, I know exactly what that feels like. I've had that request before. I understand too. I've seen some wild things on the request side just as my time as an analyst. So with this, let's go ahead and jump out into kind of our Power Query online environment. Awesome. And then let me go ahead and close out this PowerPoint here. Cool. I'm going to go ahead and turn off the camera here just because I don't think you care about seeing my face. So give me one moment. Awesome. So out in Power Query Online, this is that development environment that's available kind of within multiple different places. First thing I would recommend doing is going to your Home tab and then going to your options, global options. So these will apply to any or all projects as you start leveraging the Power Query Online experience. A few items here that I would definitely recommend just early on. These steps, if it's not already enabled, enable query folding indicators, show script and step callout. I'll talk about that as we kind of get to it. And then also column profiles. So here, data quality, if you've got that enabled already, kind of over within the Power BI desktop environment, they do have that available here within the Power Query Online too. Type detection, anytime you apply transformation, it does that change type 1, change type 2, and you're like, oh my goodness, this thing never ends. You can go ahead and disable that here within the type detection. I just turned that off here, so never detect column types and headers for unstructured sources. I'll turn that on whenever I need it, or I'll apply those transformations. And then here at the very bottom, just always allow parameterization in data sources and transformation dialogues. just leverage parameters as much as possible. Maybe it's your server address, kind of a dev, test, prod, whatever it is that you need to toggle and kind of swap out. Parameters just are so incredibly helpful. All right, so let's go ahead and press OK here now. And then one of the first ones that I always commonly see in terms of the scenario is just Power Query is way too slow. I'm waiting hours and hours and hours to load all of my data. And I'm always thinking, why? Limit your rows, filter the counts. And of course, they say, well, I need all of the information. I understand, but I'm just talking about the development experience. So as you're out here, as you're kind of working through your information, one of the first things I would recommend is doing a manage parameters and then going to a new parameter. I'm gonna go ahead and create 2 parameters here now. First one is gonna be our just, are we gonna limit rows? A toggle to limit rows, the Boolean value. Awesome. And then our type here now, we're going to use a true false, so just the Boolean property type. And then just for our suggested values, we're going to use any value, and we're just going to do a lowercase true. Cool. We now have a new parameter that's been added here within our Power Query environment. So this way, as we move forward, I'm going to go to our fact table here with our sales order detail, and I'm going to add a new step. And I'm going to say, should we go to the top here? I'm going to say, let's go ahead and keep top rows. Number of rows I'd like to keep, I'll just say, let's go ahead and keep 50. Press OK. I've now got a new data set table returned here, 50 rows. If I look at my count, 50 here in the bottom left. Right-hand side, I hover above this step. I now see that this step will be evaluated by the data source here within the icon callout. Then I also have the script. So if you're like me and you spend a lot of time maybe in the advanced editor and you have to like click back on a previous step to see, well, what logic was I applying? You can now just hover above those steps. You don't have to wait for that data preview window to finish loading your previous steps. Just hover above them. That script will be there and visible. And then on the right-hand side here are applied steps. I see that everything is folding in this example. But, at some point I have to finish my development work. I will have to load this into the system. So I need to start thinking about, how is it that I recognize when I'm done? So here in our formula bar. So I've got this table.firstN, and I've got this limit rows of true, just a toggle to limit rows with our Boolean value. So I'm going to say if, here at the very beginning, I'm going to say if my parameter limit rows, if it's just true, then table.firstN, else, just reference to my navigation 1 step. So let me go ahead and zoom in here. So because limit rows is just a Boolean, true or false, I don't have to do, is true equal to true. It's just if true, then, if false, then, kind of else here in this example. So if limit rows is true, continue to return only 50 rows, else return the full table. So let's go ahead and run this statement here now. Awesome. So adding a little bit of conditional logic here within my applied steps. Right-hand side, I'm still folding, so I've still got my green icons. I now have that script, so if limit rows, then true or false. Right-click, I have view data source query now on the bottom here, and I should expect here within the very top that select top 50. So I said bring in 50 rows. There we go. And then at that point, yes, it was able to be translated. 50 rows only. I was to change this though. And let's say I'm done with my development work. I'm now ready to flip this over to false. Let's go ahead and press false here now. Apply. Sales order detail. Kept top rows. Right click here. View data source query. Now it's bringing the full table. Just like that. Just a simple parameter. Now, of course, 50 rows may not be enough. So what I would probably recommend is just adding a new parameter here now. So row limit, rows limited. The count of the rows to be limited. Awesome. And then we'll change this into a decimal number. And we'll just say, well, let's do 500. Very cool. Return back to our statement here at the very beginning here with the 50 that we started with. We do want to update this now just to reference the rows limited parameter. And then we should expect that SQL statement that was previously at 50. We change this back to true. Awesome. It should now show that 500 value. So right click, view data source query, select top 500. Leverage parameters, kind of this true false workflow. And then obviously here also being able to easily at the very end of your workflow, just toggle it, say load the entire table, only bring in what's necessary here for my development environments. And this way I can move quickly as I apply my transformation steps. But just a very simple thing to do, kind of leveraging parameters. Awesome. You pause here. Teo, do we have any questions maybe within the chat? I just want to make sure we're not going too fast for anyone.
Sure, Alex. Fernando has lots of questions.
Yeah.
I'm trying to fence him off for as much as I can. But so basically, let me see. Pretty much he's well, the last question he asked is that why the last step appears as a function fx, and I was about to reply because that's a conditional custom column, right?
Not a custom column, but it is just conditional logic. So if we do kind of Control-Shift-M right here, we can see here it doesn't really know if it's going to be returning a table object, what the icon should be. So in this example, or fx is really just a kind of an if statement, right? So if this, then that.
Sure.
Yeah.
And he's also asking, so what you're demonstrating is Power Query online as a part of a data flow, right?
Yep.
So a lot of that stuff is not in Power BI desktop. So we see here beautiful representation of where the query is going to take place and when it's going to break. But this is only available in Power BI online. Do you know if these features eventually will make it to Power BI desktop?
I'll say coming soon, ...
All right.
It'll be a good week for everyone. So just kind of hang out on the socials, and I'll always be posting. But I mean, the team has been very vocal that they would like to bring this experience locally. I think a common thing you'll hear from me is that they want to just manage one code base. So
Gotcha.
If you think of Power Query and Excel, it's been around for what, a decade and some odd at this point. Power BI's version of it does have a little bit of differences with kind of like the diagnostics. And then they've got some newer things that Excel doesn't have. And then, of course, Power Query Online just has so much. The team would love to just concentrate on one flavor of it. And that's why I'm demonstrating it tonight. I want you to start looking at this just because this will be kind of the future. So if you're kind of seeing this for the first time, Power Query Online, definitely come out and just get your hands on it. Either through like the Data Marts experience, creating a data flow, trying it out in Power Apps, trying it out in Power Automate, Data Factory, just so many places.
And one question from me, since we are on the subject of Power Query Online and data flows. So let's say the query is slow, and I see this with my clients. Sometimes they have performance issues. How do you troubleshoot this online? So on the desktop, we have a diagnostics, potentially we can do some troubleshooting, but online, what do you do if somebody tells you, well, this data flow takes very long time?
It depends upon the source. I'll show you how I kind of leverage it, at least within Azure Data Studio, because I am using a SQL Server database in this instance. We'll cross that bridge when we get to it. If you don't mind me kind of holding off on that one, though.
Got you. Last question here from Solar. She's asking, when will query folding, I guess, become inactive? And if I understand
we're going
what
to see a lot of that tonight. Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, I'll be breaking some folding here very soon. So
Sounds good.
appreciate everyone already lighting up the chat here, and thanks so much, Teo, for taking those on as well. Let's move on to the next scenario then. So first one is it's too slow. Limit your rows. Come up with some fun conditional logic. Next one is I have this outside table. Maybe it's an Excel file. Maybe it's a text file. I want to use that to control what data I bring in. So maybe it's those users who've got a SharePoint and they really want to kind of merge it with some of your database information. They don't want to always go out and update a view, update a filter within the Power Query. They want to control that through an outside method. So get data. And I hear everyone all the time being like, oh my gosh, trying to connect to an Excel file or even a SharePoint list is just such a painful experience. That's why I love this experience up here. Select a connector or directly drag a file from your computer. Oh my goodness. All right, so let's see what Power Query Online is like. I've got this text file. I'm gonna go ahead and drag and drop this in here now, uploading a file here now for us, creating that link, upload successful. If I was to go out here into open file location, I can now see here my file is stored within a SharePoint. It's instantly linked out to that Power Query experience. And then it's just created within this apps folder here. So out in my OneDrive, I've got apps, Microsoft Power Query, uploaded files, then my color selection. So it's created a link, press next. Way easier than trying to navigate through the OneDrive or SharePoints of the past. And I'm going to go ahead and bring this in. So yes, red, blue, black, press create. Awesome. And then, of course, at this stage, it's just a simple merge, only bring in what I absolutely need. So if I go to my product table, got this color here, right here. So I'm going to do a merge queries, right table to merge. It's going to be my color selection, and inner join. So only the matching rows here. Love the new icons. So it's going to be color to column 1, 153 rows match. Press OK. What do you notice? Just right off the bat, got that red icon, merged queries. So this step will be evaluated outside of the data source. I mean, it was a simple operation. I've got 3 rows and just a text file. I want Power Query to go ahead and just recognize that and filter my tables. Well, in this example, let's say our product table is just filled with hundreds of millions of rows. We've broken folding just with this very simple operation. So first, the data has to be streamed into Power Query, and then at that stage, it then has to go through this transformation logic. So right-click, view query plan. I have these tables within my system. It does a full scan here then to then say, I grabbed information from table 1, which is your database, table 2 here with the key. We're joining these now. We're having to stream all of this information just for this view final details. I would really like for all of this to be handled by that remote system. So how can we reimagine this then? I can't get rid of this control table. I can't just tell them to go out and update SQL statements and change filters and views. I'm just not giving them that level of access. So let me think about this here again. So I really just want to filter this list. I mean, it's some text values. So on the right-hand side here, I'm going to go back to my color selection. It's currently showing as just a table. I'm going to right-click. I'm going to say, let's go ahead and drill down. Cool. So start out as a table. We've now converted it into a list. So red, black, and blue. Right-hand side here now with our applied steps. Analysis on this step was inconclusive. There's no engine for a CSV file. It doesn't really know. There's no query plan to generate. It's just telling us, hey, I wasn't able to figure it out. It's inconclusive in this stage. Kind of mentally in our background, we're like, yeah, of course, that's going to be, quote unquote red. But in this example, just kind of that gray shade for us. So I have this. I want to go back to my product table. I have this color now. So I'm going to go ahead and do text filters. And then we have this in, or a not in, if you didn't want to have some of these results. So I'm going to do an in, keep rows where color, and then choose a list parameter. All right, so Fernando was asking earlier about some of the icons. If we go on the left-hand side here, I've got table, parameter, and then I've got that list icon. So I recognize that this is a list data type. So keep rows where color is in this list. And then let's go ahead and select that, select a query, color selection. We'll go ahead and press OK. So let's go ahead and do this. So in this stage, it is broken. We can see here that this step was being evaluated outside of the data source. So let's go ahead and look at our diagram query plan. So it's now leveraging the enhanced compute engine. So unfortunately, it's having to download all of that data and then load it back into an Azure SQL database. Just not very performant. I mean, still a very simple operation. So let's go ahead and try this in maybe a new way. Let's go ahead and try this by bringing in our logic from our previous step here. So our color selection. And do OK. Awesome. I'm going to bring this in just as a kind of a subquery. So especially if you're used to kind of a database, you've got an inner query, you've got your outer query. For this example, we're going to go ahead and create, we're going to say color list equals no parameters. Then we're going to create a goes to. So we're going to create this function now to read this. Here at the very bottom, with our each list contains, I just want to start calling this color list then. Each list contains, press OK. Yep, disable privacy levels. Fine there. Cool. So once was relying on kind of an enhanced compute engine. Once was not even folding for us. We were now able to bring in our exact same statement to this product table as an inner query. So I'm going to do Control-Shift-M. That opens up the advanced editor. I've created this custom function here now. So custom function includes a subquery within our let statement. And then within our list contains here at the very bottom, we're going to call our custom function to return our color list. So very simple here. I know it may seem a little strange or a little off, but we took our original transformation, we copied and pasted it into this this query here for us. We created another let statement. So you now see two lets. Here's our first. Here's our second here, which is going to be just our custom function or our query. And then at the very end here, our list.contains. We just call our function. All of this now able to be folded. And then at the same rate, it's no longer having to leverage kind of that enhanced compute engine. If I was to right click, view data source query, we can see here that we are now back within the fold. So we talked about an in condition. So where our color is in red, blue, or black. And then because this is a linked file, we could go out there at any point in time. We could add a fourth color, a fifth color, a sixth color, whatever it may be. But a scenario where we're able to empower our people who need some type of control file, control table, whatever else it may be, and we're still able to maintain that query folding. I'm going to press pause here. Let me pause here. Teo, any questions here with regards to maybe using an outside file for people to be able to control their filtering conditions?
Sure, we have a few, Alex. So,
Yeah.
So Fernando was asking, because you have the product table twice, color, list, and product, is that why we're folding? I guess he's asking. Maybe if you can just step a little bit at the high level about what you did, that'll be awesome, Alex.
Yeah. So we tried to bring in an original file here just as a new query. Unfortunately, when we tried to leverage that within our product table, it just wasn't able to be recognized. It said, I've got one query over here, I've got another query over here. I'm not really sure how to mash them up.
Sure.
So we made it a little bit simple here. It could be a little bit more complex to us on the human side, but from the machine side, they said, all right, I'm going to go out, I'm going to grab this file, I'm going to grab the information here, I'm going to convert this now into a list. And then I'm just going to pass that list kind of within our filter selection. So within the UI or kind of the applied steps, it was able to recognize, here's the string that you're passing in, here's the filter condition that's now being generated. And then it doesn't have to leverage the enhanced compute engine, that lightning bolt that we saw previously, to try and accomplish this operation.
And why would converting the table to list avoid that?
Ask that again.
Yeah, I'm asking why would it looks like initially we had a query and then you converted this to a list. What did happen to avoid the inefficiency, right?
Yeah. So let's jump back to this here now. All right, I'm gonna get rid of this quick one. Navigation 1. And if it starts working, just be aware it does weird things. So if it works this time, it's just it's part of the fun of the live demos, right? So we've got our table here. We want to go ahead and filter this now based on this color selection list. So let's do kind of our filter rows. Oh, we're color filter rows, kind of that in condition. Select our query color selection. Excuse me. Awesome. Yep. So this time it is working. It could just be the browser cache, but what it did differently, because we're trying to kind of quote unquote merge these two different queries together, Power Query is determined I can't do this locally. I need to leverage the enhanced compute engine. So those people who may not be familiar with kind of premium per user or kind of premium capabilities, the enhanced compute engine, it'll go ahead and stream your data in, through whatever source. So it could be that remote system like a SQL database.
Sure.
It will land it into the data lake. And at that point, it'll then bulk load it into another Azure SQL database table to do more intensive operations. So this is where you can see some better performance. But in this example, I'm not a premium per user. I don't have premium. So I can almost quote unquote trick the system with these two queries to say I can still accomplish that same thing we were doing previously, just without needing that heavy compute. Because all we're really doing is 3 rows. I don't need a heavy compute for that.
Sure. And when we don't fold, what happens behind the scenes? Does it do processing row by row? I'm not sure how much you know about SSS, but we have semi-blocking, blocking, fully blocking transformations, and they work in a different way depending on what exactly happens. Sometimes row by row, sometimes the whole thing needs to be cached in memory.
Yep.
If it's no blocking, what happens? Does it switch to row by row processing, load the whole thing in memory, or?
Yeah, and that's where it'll be tough, just based upon the transformations that are trying to be applied. Like we'd kind of talked about earlier with the kind of that 256 megabyte cache. Like it's going to try and grab as much of that as possible and then start applying some of that transformation logic. But if you're doing something crazy intensive on kind of like a row-based operation, it could have to read each individual one. So I mean, case by case, but if you're feeling it slowing down, if you're feeling it start to be sluggish, that's probably a pretty good sign that you're doing something a little bit intensive within your steps, or it's just the order of operations that are potentially being applied.
Okay, and one last question here.
Yep.
From Mukesh, if we create separate custom function and call it, will then also fold?
It will fold, but it will also try and leverage the enhanced compute engine. So it's kind of an interesting predicament at that point. So let's go ahead. We'll do color selection. I'll turn this into just a quick function here. So allow me one moment here. We're going to jump into our advanced editor. We're going to do open. So this is our goes to symbol for anyone that's not familiar with kind of custom functions. Color function. Use our product 3 here at the very bottom. And then in this example, I am going to update this to our color function. Close. Awesome. So we're going to call that function here now. Still the same results. So it's going to filter that. We are still going to maintain our folding. So we've got our green indicator but because we're leveraging a custom function, it's going to now try and leverage the enhanced compute engine. I don't need it. I only need 3 rows. So from my values, I just went with a nested approach. So in this way, I could just still leverage the heavy lifting of the original remote system. So if I was to right click here, view query plan, all of this is being handled by the remote SQL database. So
awesome.
yeah,
2 more
there's some
questions
interesting
though.
tricks. Yep.
While we're talking, two more questions came in.
Yeah.
Kim is asking, if you were to disable the load of the color selection query, would it then fold?
I mean, they're still folding. So I mean, in this example, it really wouldn't matter. Luckily, it stopped having to leverage the SQL compute here for the enhanced compute engine. So if you don't need to load it in any way, shape, or form, if your users don't need to see it, if they don't want to have like that visual inspection, yeah, absolutely disable those loads.
Sure. And the last question for now, again from Mukesh. So you're saying we should avoid the enhanced compute engine?
Know when to use it. That would be my recommendation.
Can you tell us, for those that don't know, what that is, the enhanced computing engine?
Yes. So give me one moment here. Let's go out to help. We'll go to some Power Query documentation here in the very top left. Some advanced topics. Let's see here if we can't find it real quick. Data flows. Analytical versus standard. Type it in real quick. Awesome. So the enhanced compute engine of Power Query, if you were I mean, this is like predates like the data marts conversation here. So maybe I was having some Excel files, maybe it's a SharePoint list, and I really want to do some intense operations. What it will do is it will load those data flows into Azure Data Lake Gen 2 storage. And at that point, it will then bulk upload those into an Azure SQL database. And this is all being handled behind the scenes. So we kind of talk about these memory intensive operations like trying to join 2 tables. Oh my goodness, merging data is just such an expensive operation. If you're trying to append 2 tables, those are great candidates for leveraging the enhanced compute engine to help speed up your refresh times or that processing. So, or if you want to do some advanced things like having a data flow that supports direct query, fantastic opportunities to use the enhanced compute engine. If you don't need to use that, so if we were to kind of jump back to our example here, maybe there was a scenario, you've just got a few rows in another table. You don't want to wait for your data to be dropped into the data lake and then be loaded into another enhanced compute engine, quote unquote, Azure SQL. So this is where I would be like, be cautious of where you need to use it.
Okay.
And when you would use it.
Thank you. That's all for now.
Of course. Awesome. Well, then let's jump into another scenario here. I could just write way better SQL. Why am I worrying about this crazy Power Query in this M language? I know we had some fun there in the chat earlier, kind of finding the best language. It doesn't always have to be a table that can fold. There are some interesting operations that can fold kind of behind the scenes here. So let's try this now. So we're gonna do our order detail. I'm gonna go ahead and create just a new duplicate here. I'm gonna get rid of our previous step here. So just reading the initial table, and I want to find the max value or the min value, kind of one of those two. So here I want to find it from start order quantity. So traditionally, I might look at kind of remove other columns, just kind of sort ascending, descending. Here at the very top now, I'm going to do let's do our filter rows. I'm going to say just keep top rows. So we're going to keep our top 1 row. And we now have just our max value. Right click, view data source query, select top 1 from inner query, order quantity, order by descending order. Very same operation if we were to do kind of our sort rows, just in order of ascending instead. So ascending, find me the smallest value. Top rows. Awesome. So there is our smallest value, just 1. I know people, they don't like having a long list of applied steps. I'm right there with you. If I see a scroll bar on the applied steps, I'm getting nervous. I'm like, oh my gosh, what are we applying? So my requirement from this project is to limit my applied steps. I'm going to go ahead and just copy this here real quick. Our notepad. Go ahead and delete these now. Delete until end. Excuse me. We're doing FX real quick. I'm going to do navigation 1 square bracket here within our formula bar. And I just need the order quantity. Order quantity. Cool. Loading the data, it's returned it as a list. I can see here on the right-hand side, I now have this gray icon. Just analysis on the step was inconclusive. Not really sure what's going on. You know, am I leveraging the system? Am I not? So I'm going to actually add one more square bracket here, if you don't mind. Order quantity, 2 square brackets. Back in the green, I'm back in the fold. Still a table. It's returning just a single column here now, so order quantity. And then we kind of talked about some of the performance side. So I'm going to jump out into Azure Data Studio. If you're familiar with SQL Server Profiler, they do have the extension now available within Data Studio. So I'd recommend just getting that extension installed if you have the chance. Connect it out to my system. I'm going to launch Profiler here now. We're just do our PQ limits. Press start. Awesome. So as I go through my data, I'm going to go ahead and do just a quick refresh here now. Refresh. Got all of these things coming through. I don't need a lot of these though, so I'm going to just look for my SQL batch completed operations. So let's go ahead and filter our data where the event class is equal to SQL batch completed. Press OK. And then here at the very bottom, I've got this select top 1,000 order quantity value. So because Power Query is just loading in a preview of our data, that's that top 1,000. If we wanted, we could add those parameters. We could limit it even more, just depending upon our scenario. But from here, we can obviously see the CPU duration, how long it's taking to read and kind of download and get that data ready for us. So I talked about I need to find the min or the max value here. I have a table of data. So I'm actually going to use this table .min from my step. I'm going to return the order quantity. Press enter. Awesome. Right-hand side, got the value. Analysis on the step was inconclusive. Was in the fold. Right now, I'm not really too sure kind of what's going on. So let's go ahead and check the logs. This is where I always trust the logs. So jumping back out into SQL Profiler here, I now have these select top 1 statements. So I've returned a record value, so it's no longer a table, but Power Query was able to still push this back to the source system. Might select top 1, the exact same steps that we did earlier, all through the UI, now done through 1 step, 1 function. Exact same result. Here, leveraging Data Studio. So let's go ahead and Control N. We're going to copy this. And I know what you're saying. You know, just go and put a little DSC here at the very end, descending. Yes. Go ahead and run this now. Order quantity, highest value, kind of be that 25. I can hear you over there just chuckling and laughing at me. And you're saying, Alex, as a SQL developer, you know, I would just do a max. Do a max of that value. You're going to come up with the exact same result. Go ahead and run these 2 here now. So you're right. You are right. Estimated plan. So let's look at our query plans here. The one that Power Query generated here at the very top, relative to our script, it costs 77.10% in comparison with just writing a max value here at the very bottom, 22.9. So we can see the different operations. We can see the system generated Power Query may not always be the most performance. So as Teo would kind of talk about earlier, pushing it as far upstream as possible, as far downstream as necessary. So, you know what? I'm going to leverage this SQL statement. Back in our Power Query, you know, this is just a little bit too costly here for me, but I am going to just go ahead and duplicate this work. Got our original steps here, my source. If I want to write a SQL statement, I do remember, you know, anything I do after the fact will then be broken. So only my first step will be folding. That was true at one time. It is no longer true. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to take this. I'm going to do value dot native query. I've got these new options here. So I'm going to do just my source. I'm going to do my query here. So it's going to get that entered. So I love writing SQL. So, you know, I'm going to default to SQL. If I have any parameters, no, I don't. So I'm going to go ahead and press null. And I'm going to pass in this optional record set that says I want to enable folding after this step. So enable folding equals true. Custom step. Evaluation is canceled. Contained a native database query. That's fine. I'm still fine. We cannot fold. What did I break? Give me one moment here while I debug that. Yep. And then which step? Let's modify or remove the enabled folding. All right, that one's breaking at the moment. I've got folding equals true. Give me one last second here. Open comma expected. It's erroring out of me. Womp womp. All right, well, we'll come back to that one then. If we have some time, we'll kind of debug here, which is what's not working. So I've got my targets, got my null. All right, wah wah. Apologize for that one. We'll come back to it then, save it for the end. But you can still write native SQL. You can enable folding. You can continue to do operations just on top of kind of your SQL statement, and then also using the UI. You will have to enable kind of this folding flag. So that'll just be one of those items that you want to kind of be aware of whenever you kind of get to that stage.
So that flag needs to be enabled explicitly on the step
That is
for
correct.
subsequent steps to fold.
That is correct. Yep. So let me try this one more time here.
Doesn't this have to be on the source? Yeah, I was about to say, usually we'll go to advanced options on the source to put the query in there.
Yeah, but ideally you want to do it from your source step. So this would be the target kind of query. And let's see here if we can get this one more time. I don't need this order as table. See if we can get that to generate. Yeah, that worked. All right, so square bracket, enable folding equals true. It's giving us the operation. Please modify the native query. Yeah, see, there's the original, but something it's not liking something here within this folding. Live demos. All right, we'll come back to that one if we can debug it here at the very bottom. But as we can see, we can leverage Power Query. We can also write our own native SQL if we really wanted to. So leveraging maybe two different engines. So leveraging the database, leveraging the mashup side. For this, I want to go and explore another one here, maybe finding the median price kind of our table. So we have our table.min, we have our table.max. You'll be kind of surprised to see, so hash shared. will give us our full list of operations here within Power Query. So all of these, let's convert this to a table. And we're going to look for maybe a table dot. Actually, let's look for median. So text filters contains, we're looking for median. Awesome. So there is no table.median. There's only a list.median function. If we click on this, we can see just some of the values that we need to satisfy here. So it returns the median value in the list. So remember, we converted our table just using that square brackets into a list for a single column. So we want to go ahead and kind of leverage that same approach here now. So within our product table, we want to find the median value here just for our list price. So I'm going to right click this here. We'll do a duplicate, get rid of some of our earlier steps. Instead of that FX, we're going to take our step. We're going to say, let's find the list price column, right click, custom here now. Taking a little bit of time for that kind of chugging. I do want to kind of convert this though into just kind of a single step that will fold. So I've got my entire column, so 2 square brackets here now. If we were to look at our profiler at the very bottom, we'll see that select operation, select top 1000 list price. I now want to introduce stop folding. So I've got this select statement. It is working. It is folding. So I've selected list price, FX. I'm going to say, because I don't have a table.median function, I'm going to stop folding right here. Still works. I've still got my green in the previous step. I've just now offloaded this though into kind of that Power Query transformation engine. And with this, let me just go ahead and add another square here. So my custom, my list price, if I recall, I can turn that into a list. I now want to leverage the list.median value. So list median, custom price. Awesome. Right-hand side here, table.stop folding when I hover above, probably a good indicator here. So stop folding and bring locally custom one here, median list price, multiple icons here now going on. It's a folding indicator, not folding, inconclusive. And I now want to filter my table. So I'm going to go back FX. I don't want to point at that step anymore. I want to return to my original navigation 1. Got green icons again. I'm pointing back to my original navigation 1 step. So I'm jumping multiple steps, kind of going back in the past. Power Query is not a linear kind of step language here. I can jump around. I can do some crazy things here within my my order of operations. It's how it builds that final expression, that final query. That's where a lot of the magic is here. So now in this example, I want to filter kind of my list price. So number of filters, and I'll just do a less than. I'll just kind of enter maybe like a fictitious value here. So I'll just say 50. And now I want to go ahead and update this now to point to my median list price step. So median list price. Cool. I'm going to bring this down a little bit. Looking now at kind of our diagram view. So if you're, once again, you're just kind of getting introduced into the Power Query Online experience, bottom right-hand side here, diagram view, or just that view, diagram view here in the top. I now see my transformation, so I can see where I connected my SQL Server database. I kind of have this navigation step, so I'm connecting to it, but then I start creating some different branches. And I want to go ahead and change these. I'm going to change these to, come on. All right, diagram view, show step names. Awesome. So selected list price, I created one branch. I broke it from the original system. I then started doing some additional transformations here, just my stop folding. I broke that fold. I downloaded that data into this local transformation engine of Power Query, and then I quickly found the median price. With that, though, I then passed it back to kind of my original query. So then this way it is able to dynamically write this for me. So if I view data source query, it takes the list price, uses that as our filtering condition here at the very end for our where statement. To confirm this, once again, we always want to trust the logs. So let me go ahead and query this data. Just get a nice clean list, do a home refresh, filtered rows. Folding, go back out here. So select top. I see that where condition here within our data. So yes, the system was able to accurately take some information. We stopped folding intentionally. At that point, we did our list.median to find our median value, and then we passed that back to kind of that remote system to help us with this filtering criteria. So we're taking data, we're downloading it, we're leveraging it here. If we were to look at our final query plan, it is connecting to our remote system, and then it is building that value.native query here for us. Pause here. This one had a lot going on.
No questions for now, Alex, but Fernando was kind enough to put a piece of kind of documentation about the native query. Hopefully that syntax will help you to
awesome.
get the enable folding equal to the one, I mean, you wanted to enable it before, so maybe it was just a matter of changing the syntax a little bit. I see that they use square brackets.
Yeah, we were doing that too.
We were doing
Square
that too?
brackets.
Okay,
Yeah.
there we go. Okay. Native query.
Target is any, yeah.
Target.
Used our source. I don't know if it's gonna try and do navigation.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah,
Okay.
we'll come back to that one kind of at the very end.
All right.
Group by default. Awesome.
And there is a question from Kev just came in. If we separate those inconclusive steps as a separate query, then should it fold?
Yeah, you'd be able to kind of break it out if you'd like. If you wanted to kind of have some of the steps being done in another query and then just kind of merge those together, not the actual quote unquote merge queries, but if you want to have some operations over here, some other operations over here, it's really going to be that final statement that Power Query is going to be evaluating.
Okay. And Kim was saying it looks like that flag enable folding. It's true by default, so we don't have to probably enable it, if I understand that right.
It shouldn't be by default, because if you think of like a SQL injection, it's like the default behavior should be, whatever's in that native SQL statement at the very beginning, don't have any other outside systems kind of potentially injecting something. So I know you have to enable it, but if we were to kind of look at this over here, I think this is probably the example everyone's going to come back to, but advanced options, select max. Yeah, like there is no enable folding flags here within that original statement. It has to be done through that value.database, or I'm sorry, that value.native query function.
Okay.
Awesome. So taking information, intentionally breaking our folding here with that new table.stop folding, and then from there, it's still reflected out in our logs. So if we're to kind of look here, we'll find one of them amidst all this crazy. There we go. Select list price. That's where we stopped our folding. And then at that point, we downloaded that data just locally into that Power Query mashup engine, found our median value, and then used that to pass back just to our original remote statement with the Power Query. Very cool thing, very inventive things. Just be aware, just because it was green and it's now red doesn't mean you can't get back to green just here within your applied steps. Awesome. Any other questions here? Just in regards to maybe this scenario, just before we kind of move on to the next, just kind of leveraging two different engines to come up with kind of that final value.
No other questions.
Awesome.
No other questions at this point. Let's keep on going.
Cool. So sales order header, I've got all of these warnings here in the bottom left here. This query contains complex types that cannot be loaded. Complex types cannot be loaded. So it's all of these relationships that I have within my system. So I can see here maybe a primary and foreign key. So it's connecting out to kind of the sales LT customer table from my order header table, sales order detail table. So I mean, all of these, I don't know what the DBAs are going to add tomorrow. I don't know what new columns they may add as well. So I don't want these complex types, but I do want, you know, any new table, I'm sorry, any new column that may be added to my table. So traditionally, I might come out here, I might look at just kind of this remove other columns. Yes, this folds, it writes that select statement for us that we love. At the very right-hand side. Awesome. But I'm then limiting myself. So I won't get those new columns that may be added to this table in the future. But I need to get rid of these crazy complex types, these records, these lists, these other tables. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually look at this table schema. Just do table.schema. I'm going to kind of understand a little bit more about my table. Awesome. I've got all my columns here. Close this. So I've got the kind. So what is the column type? Record.type, table.type. You know, there could be also a list. So record, list, table, those are our structured value types. I want to make sure that I can remove these, like get rid of them, don't need them. You know, they're giving me these warnings that I can't proceed if I try and bring them in. So I want to do this dynamically. Let me think about this. So I want to remove columns that have these types. So with this table dot columns of type. So I'm going to reference my navigation stuff, just here on the right-hand side. And I want to find the type that are of record, the type that are of list, and then the type that are of table. So my three different structured values. So anywhere where I find record, table, or a potential list here within my columns, just go and give me that list back. Awesome. So here is any column that may potentially you know, meet that criteria here. So that record list table. Inconclusive step, you know, Power Query is not really sure what I'm going to do with this list. But with this, I'm going to go and point back to that navigation one step. Cool. So if I remove columns, you know, I'm constantly doing that all the time, you know, either selecting or removing others, or even kind of leveraging some of the UI here at the very top. So I want to do table dot remove columns. Got my first step here, and I want to pass through a list for this criteria here. So I'm going to reference my custom step here just on the right-hand side here. I'll give them some better names here in a moment. Table.remove columns. It's evaluated. If I go to the right-hand side here, I now see that those complex types are no longer listed. View data source query. They're now removed as well. All here, dynamically. Any new potential, you know, relationship that's added to this table, I don't have to worry about it. You know, I've got 4 here listed today. If they create a new relationship tomorrow, I've got 5, 6, 7. Power Query will intelligently go out here, find those columns of type, and then I can also dynamically remove them here, just leveraging this step. So if you're constantly finding new columns being added, maybe some of your queries breaking, think about a dynamic way in which you could remove those or even select those which you need within your operation. You pause here. Think questions about kind of reading the column headers, which is all just part of our schema, and then also leveraging those to kind of update our query.
Sure. Tom was saying this is a very nice trick. And Fernando is asking, is this a better approach than choosing columns? Specifically, I guess.
Yeah, so if you remember earlier, if we were to do right click here, I'll get rid of these steps here just in the example. But I'm a big fan of remove others columns. So if we were to right click here, remove other columns, I've selected sales order ID through online order flag. It's hard coding those within our formula bar. So if I was hoping to see a new column that I've been working on, it's not going to show up here. So I'm going to come back out to my data flow. I've got to edit my step. I've got to reprocess it. And I'm right back to where I started. So in this example, I could just go out into my settings. I could hit refresh. I don't have to open up the editor. If I was to kind of look at it through maybe this dynamic process over here. At the same rate, this is a table.select columns, table.remove columns is what we were doing in the previous. Just if you're having to hard code the values, just think, is there any way that can potentially future-proof this, to inherit my new work or to kind of prevent new things from being introduced, either through select or remove.
Sure. And Pranam is asking, can we merge custom step within custom one? I guess we have to go back to your previous example. Yeah, so the question is, can we merge custom step with custom one so we have just one step?
Yes. All right, so let's talk about that. So columns, find list, table, record. So the question here is, we've got this step, we know that we could probably just nest a lot of these values. So if I was to go to custom one, if I was to actually just take this reference to my previous step, get rid of it. What if I just include it right here?
Mm-hmm.
Exact same results, exact same green icon. It's still folding. Everything is the exact same. Opinions within the kind of community. I think it's a lot easier to debug step by step than it is to potentially try and nest all of your operations together in a single line.
That brings a great question. So wouldn't that be more efficient though, if we try to reduce the number of steps by combining them together, or pretty much Power Query is going to execute them in the same way?
It'll execute them in the same way. Yep.
I see.
Okay. That's the fun part about the engine.
Okay. Well, Fernando, I guess is saying, but if we need to really choose a set of columns from the database after removing the list tables, record, etc., then what do you suggest? But if we really choose a set of columns, okay, so if we just need to choose a columns, then what will be, I guess, the most efficient way to do that?
Well, I'm not going to use the term "it depends." So I'm going to say the columns that you bring in should be dependent upon your project. Don't bring in anything else that you don't need, because we know that it is just slowing you down. There could be multiple reasons where you're like having to figure out in the future which column is used where, and people are like, I don't know. I've never used that column, but you can't remove it because it'll break X, Y, and Z, and they can never figure out where the downstream impacts and where those columns go. Always start with only bringing in what you need. In this example, what I'm just showcasing is, especially if you're trying to be just a kind of that future-proof mindset, think about your columns. Maybe you're like, I don't want keys, I don't want IDs. You can kind of go through your column names. So let me go and do, let me get back here. Custom one. All right, here we go. Table.column names. Like this is a list of all of your names. Remove items from the list that contain ID, that contain key, if those are potentially expensive fields where you're like, I don't need those, I'll never need them. Find those future-proof things that you can do here, leveraging that Power Query transformation engine.
Awesome. That's all for now.
Sweet. All right, so let's move into kind of our last one here then, just as we kind of approach the time. So in my address, we start talking about it a little bit here. So our column headers, this is metadata. This is important things that you can also transform. So don't just think of that it is this data preview. All of this, obviously we right click and we do a rename operation. But I want to think about those automated methods. I want to think about that future-proofed approach. So I'm going to do an fx dot column names. I'm going to return this information within a list, right-hand side. It is inconclusive. Hey, Power Query doesn't really know what I'm trying to accomplish as of yet. So I'm going to take this, and I'm going to go ahead and transform this list. Let's go ahead and take this list.transform. I'll come up with a better name after custom, but we'll go ahead and say I want to, for each item within this list, so my for each kind of iteration here, I'm going to do a splitter.split text by character transition. I'm going to create a list here as well. So I'm going to create another list, so the kind of that nesting. So a.z, so I'm going to create a list of values from lowercase a through lowercase z. And I'm also going to do another one here, uppercase a through uppercase z. So anywhere where I find kind of text that is going from a lowercase value, so address, lowercase s, into an uppercase ID, go ahead and split that. Just split those values for me. So let's go ahead and do our iterator here just at the very end, the underscore. I go ahead and close that out. Cool. I've got a list of values here. Address ID, address line 1. I kind of keep going through here. Address line 2. Let's find another one. City, state, province. We talked about some nesting, so let's go ahead and just nest these while we can. So for these, we'll do a text.combine, which will be taking a list of text values, which we're just now seeing. I've got 2 items within this list. We're going to go ahead and just combine those here with a space character. There we go. Got to get my parentheses order. Cool. Address ID, address line 1, address line 2, state, space, province. I know my DBAs, they're always mashing all their stuff together, having underscores, yelling at me with the uppercase. With any of these, I mean, you could come out here, you can instantly transform your column headers. So let's maybe do like a text.upper. Instantly transform your column headers. Upper, lower, proper, however it is that you want to transform your text. All of this is possible. So what I want to do, though, is I want to actually pass this back kind of into our original column headers. So I've got my custom one, which is going to be my column names. Got custom one here, which is going to be clean column names. And I want to combine these 2 lists together. I want to zip them up. I'm going to do fx, say list.zip, and I'm going to take kind of my original column names, take my clean column names, put these in a list. There we go. So my curly brace here now. Awesome. List 1, address ID, list number 2, address line 1, address space line 1, was number 5, state, province, state, province. So because I have the exact same number of items from this list, 1 through 12, this list of clean values 1 through 12, I'm able to zip those up into another list. And the reason for this is I want to pass these through to my original navigation 1. Then if I was to rename this step right here, state, province, space, I'm going to get that table.rename columns operation. I have to pass in a list of list. So state, comma, state, province. This is a list that is contained within another list, which we've already done with our zipping. So from this, I'm going to get rid of this list of lists. I'm going to reference our custom step here. Actually, let me rename this real quick. We'll do our zipped columns. Cool. So let's get rid of this. Let's reference our step. Zipped columns. Boom. And then we'll clean this up here just for a little bit of readability. Let's get rid of that step. Navigation 1. Awesome. Right-hand side here, got my initial steps here, folding. I kind of went and did some crazy stuff here on the right-hand side here that Power Query was just able to figure out kind of the inclusive steps, what I was trying to accomplish. But then at the very bottom here, I'm back folding. The best part is I was able to automatically rename all of my columns, adding a space, including some readability. Maybe with these numerical values, I could also do some additional transformations. But I didn't have to right-click, rename 10,000 different columns at once. I was able to dynamically do that. Right-hand side here, rename columns, view data source query. All this crazy complex operations that I just did with kind of list transforms, list.zip, it was able to instantly recognize that all I'm really doing is just adding an alias to my SQL here for each column. Whew, we go and pause here. Any questions here about dynamically renaming all of your columns all at once?
Nothing so far in the chat window. Maybe we'll give it a few seconds. I'm sure the questions will start coming in. I guess question from me, how long did it take you to learn all of this syntax by heart, the M language syntax?
Yeah, so I'm kind of from a different era where there was no IntelliSense. So at that point in time, like we're kind of seeing here within kind of the Power Query Online experience, but it was a lot of the documentation where they had the specifications guide. And then from there, it was just, reading through community forums. I always like hanging out on Reddit. And then obviously Twitter, just the same, but find a problem, see if there's something within the language that you could potentially solve it with. So I think if we were to go back here, just our hash shared, that returns all of the functions here within the Power Query language, and then just kind of going through. So if I was to convert this back into a table, we're gonna do a fun thing here now. So we're gonna split a column by delimiter, split it by period. That'll tell us our functions. Awesome. And then from here, I've got my diagnostics, right? From this column, what is my value distribution? I can see that there's a lot of table functions, 111 of 950. Lists, 72. Dates, 58, number 49. Find a data type, read through, maybe see what's going on. So if I was to right click this equals, I now am returning all of the date functions. There's nothing too crazy here. Is in previous day, is in current day. As soon as you start figuring out data type by data type, a lot of the stuff just starts making sense. But a lot of it is just kind of general curiosity.
I see. Awesome. Any questions from the community? I guess nothing else. Okay. Any questions, guys? Last chance for Alex.
Yeah. For many people, leveraging kind of Data Studio and maybe even like Profile or kind of the execution plans to kind of looking at the dynamic SQL that's being generated by Power Query, seeing if you can't beat it by writing your own. I'm always kind of curious just how people are kind of looking at performance optimization or even thinking about kind of crazy ways to kind of leverage the Power Query M language.
So I personally kind of old school. I use SSMS, just this is my experience. So I use the profiler there.
Yep.
I don't do much work with Data Studio because it just lacks some of the features that I need, and like being able to connect to analysis and all that stuff.
Yeah.
But let's see.
I agree. If and when analysis services has that connectivity within Data Studio, I'll probably be done with SSMS. I like it over here. It's incredibly lightweight in terms of like system resources, which I think is it is difficult, right? Because we're having to use Power BI Desktop, teams, all these different things that are all competing for our resources. So just something we're always a lot more mindful of these days.
So I'm forward-looking question, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
This right now, Power Query, as you know, it's doesn't have a destination, doesn't have destinations to allow you to output data into different locations, let's say flat files or databases. Is this on the roadmap? Can we expect at some point Microsoft actually to enhance it with destinations?
Yeah, let's go and take a look here, just out on the release plan. Hopefully everyone's installed the app that is kind of maybe looking at the kind of what's coming up. So let's look at data flows. It should be, let's go and take a look here. Mm-hmm.
Nothing, I guess.
Yeah, I'm trying to figure out the name here. It may have been moved here, but the next generation of data flows, and it could just be data flow. Let's see here if we get any better. Yeah, so they had it out here listed, but they were going to support load destinations.
Mm-hmm.
So that would be one of those things I would start kind of just checking out, through user groups. What is the roadmap of the next month? We're all in this together, but load destinations, that'll be the one you want to kind of keep an eye out for here on the roadmap.
Awesome. And meanwhile, we have a few questions.
Yeah. Here we go. Public preview. Load. There we go. Support loading data flow output to new destinations.
And where is that planned for?
This one is going to be for the public preview of the next generation. Yeah, so let me drop this in the chat for everyone.
Awesome. Do you know if this will apply also to Power Query in Power BI desktop or just data flows?
I wouldn't expect kind of that local development, because that would still just be doing Power Query into a data set, because that's what Power BI leverages. But hopefully, whether it be in Power BI data flows or like a Power Apps data flow, hopefully we'll maybe see some different flavors there, just with this new support for load destinations.
Yeah, and it will help us also compete with other vendors like Alteryx, which they actually have that feature, but that's okay. Mukesh is asking, will you share the PBIX file for reference?
Yeah, just from tonight, kind of the steps that we did. Yeah, I'll go data flow and I'll store it out in the GitHub repo. And then that way, if you'd like, you can go ahead and load this into your environment. Let me do a little bit of cleanup here, just for the areas that are most broken. But I'll definitely share this for everyone that's interested.
And if you can post the link to your GitHub repo, that would be awesome. Kim is asking, when is IntelliSense going to be fixed?
I'm right there with you. I'll say you'll hear more things later this week, just in terms of like what we just talked about, the roadmap. For today, I think Visual Studio Code will continue to be your best experience, just for Power Query development. And then that goes for both kind of formatting the code and also kind of the IntelliSense. But this will be your North Star, where you'll continue to probably look at. So maybe let's go into let's find a good one here. There we go. Copy this, paste, format our document. So if you start getting used to kind of the Power Query formatter and VS Code, this is what they would like to bring into these environments. Get used to it over here. You'll see it over there. But a lot of things will hopefully start making sense here very soon.
Sure. Pranam is asking, any learning sources that you recommend for using SQL with Power BI and for Azure Data Studio?
I don't know that there's a lot of maybe good community resources, so maybe I'll take that back just as feedback that I can go ahead and write something up for the Power Query blog, if that would be helpful.
Yeah,
I just wrote an article today, so hopefully maybe people have gotten a chance to read that.
Right, and SQL is so popular, has been there for many, many years. So I'm sure there is plenty of good books step by step, because I guess the question is how to actually learn SQL if I'm a business user. So I guess
start with the UI. Simple transformations like a filter that you recognize within Power Query. View the query plan, and you'll be like, oh my gosh, I I'll kind of use my example here within the blog. Let me paste this here.
Sure.
Here we go. Like filter using the UI, bike or Sql here, and then at the very end, just start reading through. What is SQL generating in this example? Where statement, and then I find my bike or my cycle. But that's how I kind of learn SQL, is just taking the things that I know, through Power Query, and then just starting to figure out how to translate those into kind of new systems.
Mukesh is asking about the link to use the profiler in Data Studio. So Mukesh, when you install Data Studio and go to extensions, there is an extension button on the left navigation. You can actually search for extensions. You can type profiler and you will find it. Yeah, Alex is just showing.
Yeah, and I'll be able to copy this. I should be able to paste this here in our, where's the, I have generally like a share. Here you go, I'll paste this link. And I usually have like a shareable extension, but I don't see it.
Right. Mukesh is asking, and how to have this search enabled to search based on approximate match like you used in the app?
Which part was that? I don't recall approximate match.
Maybe Mukesh you could clarify, because also I don't remember when he demonstrated this. How to have the search enabled to search based on approximate match.
In the release plan app.
Oh, yeah. So just here at the very top, just keywords. I'm going through both the title and then any of the description within the article. So data flow would be that one that I was just using, but if you were to do, I don't know, I'll use Teams as kind of an example. Just any keywords you'll find, it'll kind of do a pretty good search for you. But if you haven't downloaded the template app,
so yep. I want to ask, like, how to have this one, like when I'm building the report, how I can enable this feature in my report, like when I'm developing a report or application app.
Oh, so I mean, this is just an imported data set and then a custom, or just kind of the custom visual.
Custom visual, or
right?
Visual?
But Pram, yeah, I mean, the slicer in Power BI has a search functionality.
Yep.
I'm not sure if this is what you're asking for. You can enable the slicer for a search mode. Do you know how to do that?
Yes, I know that.
Okay. So then this is a custom visual. Okay.
Yeah, and I think it's one that's been out there for ages. So if you just go out to like the app gallery, where is the visuals, app source, and then if we did, text filter. I think this one's been out there for quite a few years.
Okay.
Yeah, but that's all I'm using. It's nothing too advanced, nothing too crazy. Just doing some simple string search, kind of on top of a column in my data set.
Cool. Okay. Mukesh is asking for a link for your blog.
Yep.
If you don't mind, if you can put that one also.
Yep. Posted that one in the chat there for the practical query folding.
Sethart mentions that there is a Microsoft Learn has a SQL track. So this is, this is awesome. Microsoft Learn is a great resource.
Yeah.
Really nice. So if you go there and search for SQL, probably that'll be your first destination for the person who is asking how to learn SQL.
And they do a fantastic job over there. A lot of their modules.
Oh, I'm really impressed. I did recently. I studied for a certification, and I did one of the new exams there, and I was impressed. You can go to. They set up a lab for you. You can practice. It's very, very nice.
Oh, they've got some VMs out there?
They have. I mean, that lab, that test that I took has a Synapse in it, data lake, and all of this. And for probably, I would say 60–70% of all these topics, you can just go ahead and start a lab. They provision it for you, and you just go there and practice. That's what awesome. It's just very difficult stuff to do. All right, well, I think that's it. I don't see any more questions. Alex, this was really awesome. And I hope, in a few months we can do this again, see where we are.
Great.
Power BI data Marts probably will be mature back then, and there's going to be a new stuff that we can show. Just to give you an idea, but everybody says kudos for Alex. Keep bringing great guest tale. Thank you. Sure, Fernando, that's fine. But thank you so much, Alex, and have a great evening, guys. The next one's
Appreciate it,
going to be
everyone.
August 1st. Yeah.
Thanks, everyone. Bye now.
Bye-bye.